Hi, it's me, Andrzej. My throat is a bit sore because these are two-day tests of the new Africa Twin CRF 1100L. And during these 2 days, I recorded a lot of video material. I even made a vlog about what these tests look like a bit behind the scenes. So there's really a lot of content waiting for you. I'll try to answer all the questions you've asked in the meantime so that you can be as satisfied as possible as viewers and readers of Short Motorcycle. Readers, because if you want to learn everything about the Honda Africa Twin 1100, you'll have to do some reading. Since if I were to talk about every change that has taken place in these machines, we'd be sitting here for an hour and I'd have to ramble on. And in the current October issue, all the changes compared to the previous model are described one by one, and all you need to do is read it. And if it's already after October, then you just need to look for it on the website. I'll focus a bit on the riding impressions and on answering the questions you've asked. The main question, is the new Africa Twin worth it? Oh Jesus, definitely worth it. Yesterday we spent the day on the adventure sports, and I don't know if I've already said this or not, or on which video, but I'll repeat it once more. The sum of small improvements has made a really big difference. Not only did Honda listen to its customers, it also listened to journalists and testers and eliminated the mistakes and imperfections that existed in the past. And on top of that, they added a few things of their own. First and foremost, the motorcycles are lighter and a bit more powerful. Lighter the weight reduction isn't anything spectacular since we're talking about just a few kilograms, but these are kilograms removed from very important places. You know, it's like me, I'd gladly get rid of 2 kilos of my love handles of shame. There wouldn't be much of a difference on the scale, but I definitely feel a lot better about it. And that's exactly how it is with the Africa Twin, because the weight has been taken off the gearbox, the frame, and the entire engine. 70% of the engine parts are new components, in the sense that they took everything out, rethought it, redesigned it, and tried to make the engine components as light as possible. And you can really feel it. You feel it immediately when you open the throttle with the very first reaction, with the very first twist of the throttle. The engine is more responsive, more aggressive, and has much more character than the previous one. This is a really great change. The same goes for the gearbox. It operates much more smoothly. I'm talking about the manual one. It's paired with a quick shifter, which is optional, but even though the pulse could be a bit shorter, so if you're not revving it high, just for example at medium revs, it's still worth keeping the throttle slightly pressed. The gearbox itself works very softly, very precisely. It's just excellent. The DCT has also been optimized in terms of weight. It operates much more smoothly than before compared to, for example, those from 10 years ago. It's a world of difference. The improvement in this gearbox is just huge. Sometimes I didn't even feel it shifting gears. It did it so smoothly. In addition, it's now connected to the IMU, that little Bosch computer that measures whether the bike is doing this or that or this or that, and it knows exactly if we're in a turn and when the gear can be changed and when it can't. Does it do this perfectly already? That's a question for the people who will be riding it, because you really need to put in thousands of kilometers on all kinds of routes to be 100% sure. But I know from my own experience that when I always rode with DCT, I often helped myself with the buttons. Even in automatic mode, I would downshift or upshift. Here, I did that much less frequently, and even in S mode, I didn't really feel the need to intervene. The second thing is the frame. The frame, I'm not sure if you remember from the tests of the first Africa Twin, but I always said that this motorcycle has one of the best chassis you could possibly create for an adventure machine. It's about the combination of the frame and engine, flexibility and rigidity. This frame works perfectly with the suspension, perfectly supporting it, both when cornering and off-road. The engine is mounted at 6 points. If you don't remember, it's mounted on very delicate brackets, which allows it to move as needed. And in addition, a very bold move was made. They removed a certain crossbar from the front of the machine, a kind of brace in the engine. And it's funny because I talked about this. I met the person here who is responsible for it. We called him the hero of the frame. Apparently, at first it was just drilled out. They checked it and thought, wow, it's a little better. Suddenly they wondered, what if we cut it out? So they cut it out. Oh, the motorcycle rides even better now. And then it was a matter of very intensive testing to see if it had a negative impact on the overall rigidity of the structure. As it turns out, it holds up just fine. As a result, for me, this motorcycle is the perfect example, the perfect definition of how important the chassis and suspension are in motorcycles, especially the frame, the swing arm, and everything else, because the swing arm has also been changed, redesigned a bit in the motocross style. If you take a look at it, it looks like one from a CRF 1150. This motorcycle handles brilliantly, phenomenally, stably, just absurdly well. We were shocked when we rode the adventure sport through the corners that a motorcycle with big wheels and such a narrow tire could have such extremely high grip. You ride through that corner and you can feel it. You know, these are micro movements that theoretically you wouldn't even notice, but if you really focused on it and exaggerated the image, you'd feel how the frame supports the motorcycle, how it flexes, and the bike digs into the asphalt and just turns. It's indescribable. You just have to try it for yourself. The fact is, we had very grippy roads here, but this motorcycle is made for seeking out those kinds of grippy, fun roads. The handling is truly top-notch. On top of that, there's the electronic suspension. Yesterday we rode with the Showa Era electronic suspension. I'm not sure if I'll include the interview now. We'll see how much time it takes. I have an interview with the Showa engineers. They explain how this suspension works. To put it simply, the forks are actually conventional inside the normal valves. Only one of the fork legs is equipped with a motion sensor, while the other leg, interestingly enough, features a very special solenoid. Is that correct? A device that controls the oil flow and regulates it in real time, measured in milliseconds. So it takes information from the movement of the front and rear wheels, from the IMU, from the throttle, and from the brake. It gathers all the data and adjusts the motorcycle, or rather the suspension, to the appropriate situation. We don't feel like anything is happening there, any kind of magic. We simply feel as if the suspension is perfectly set at every moment, just like a normal conventional suspension we're familiar with from motorcycles. And now the question is it worth paying extra for this suspension? The automatic answer, it's somewhat worth it, but not necessarily. Because the thing is, it's not like this motorcycle, since this one actually has conventional suspension, that the other one will be faster through corners or, I don't know, ride better off-road. That's not the case. This one handles just as brilliantly, but the difference is that even if I were in off-road mode, rode out of that terrain, the suspension would still work softly, pleasantly, and nicely. And if I suddenly hit the highway, forgot to change the setting, and was riding at 210 kilometers per hour, leaned over in a curve, the computer would immediately sense the speed, register it, and know that I'm cornering at a much higher speed. And even though off-road mode is set, it would change its settings so that the motorcycle remains as stable as possible. And that stability is, I'll say it again, simply phenomenal, because at one point, while fully leaned into a curve, we reached 218 kilometers per hour on this motorcycle, on these wheels, on these tires, and it was total relaxation. I felt like I was riding a purely road bike, even a bit of a sport bike. Zero stress. I just went for it. Simple as that. Now, when it comes to performance itself, don't expect it to be much higher, because I don't know why, but the top speed is pretty much the same. Acceleration, you can feel it slightly better, but it's not a huge gap between the old Africa and the new one. It's probably related to the new emission standards, because here we already have Euro 5. The throttle response is nicer, the performance is comparable, maybe just a bit better. Next up, for example, is this windscreen. The windscreen adjustment, which was missing in the previous model, is here now. And I'm glad there are some downsides or imperfections in this motorcycle, because how is it possible these days to make an adjustable windscreen that requires two hands to operate it? So you have to do it with both hands. You can end up with it a bit crooked, unfortunately. Honestly, I just don't know, I don't get it. So luckily, there is something I can nitpick about. The same goes for the electronic system. It's just not that easy to figure out right away. There are easier systems out there right now, but this is the first such advanced one, the first advanced electronics in a Honda, so we can cut them some slack. By the second day, I was operating everything without any problems, and it was going smoothly. And the fact that we can display Google Maps on the screen just by connecting our phone, just remember though that it's only for iPhones, which is actually a real plus. And then on the main screen, we have the map, even Janosik. When I connected my iPhone, it popped up that Janosik was available. You just had to click through a few more things. There wasn't really time for that because there was a lot of driving today. So theoretically, we'll even be able to display Janosik up there, and below on the main display, we still have speed, gear, and similar information. I consider that more of a gadget, but the driver assistance systems are definitely not just gadgets. All the electronics, meaning traction control, wheelie control, engine braking, everything. This is finally the way it should be. You remember that I used to complain that the Japanese are a bit behind the Europeans when it comes to electronic systems. So they said, all right, that's it. We're going with Bosch like everyone else, and we're building the new electronics on that, and the traction control is extremely good. That's what I was riding today. I'll get to that in a moment because that's a separate topic. The traction control is extremely good. You have to remember that these levels are there for a reason. I was riding on the road tires, on those dual-purpose tires, on gravel with Adventure Sport, and already on level 3. On level 3, I was sliding so much that at some point the slides were actually a bit too much. So basically I should have been riding on an even lower setting, And then later, as I lowered the traction control levels, even on knobby tires, for the first time ever off-road, I didn't turn off the traction control at all during the test because I just felt it wasn't necessary. I was sliding the rear, I felt like I had full control, and maybe once or twice it intervened when it noticed that things were getting a bit excessive. So the traction control is fantastic. And finally, it's separated from the wheelie control, meaning we can set independently whether the motorcycle should lift the front wheel or not. We can turn it off completely, so we have traction control. We ride through corners, taking care of the front wheel's traction. But if we want, we can lift it onto the wheel, jump over an obstacle, or just pop a wheelie, because this motorcycle is very eager to do that in first gear, second, and then it's even happy to lift in third. Yeah, cool. Engine braking. For me, this kind of gadget works. I just check it works. Besides that, ABS, which has always been Honda's biggest issue. I don't know if you remember the earlier Africa Twin test. Now it's much better. Now, for example, in off-road mode, we have ABS. It works on both the front and rear wheels, but we can still turn it off completely on the rear. Finally, this ABS is such that when I was riding on gravel, the road was very slippery today. I squeezed the brake lever all the way, and I could feel that grip is there. It catches it well. The lever didn't kick back extremely, to the point where I was scared. My eyes would get wide, thinking I wouldn't make it through the turn. Surprisingly, sometimes I could feel the ABS working through the lever, and I mentioned this to the engineers. They're aware of the issue, so maybe they'll fix it. Like when my wheel lifted off the ground, you know, I was riding with my finger on the brake the whole time, just going along, and then, you know, I hit a little bump with the throttle, and suddenly I could feel the wheels were in the air, and the lever kicked back a bit. So I just had to grab it before the turn, squeeze it, and everything was fine, but it was a bit of a strange feeling. As for the jumps themselves, that's something I didn't get to test because there weren't any jumps anywhere. But imagine this, that electronic suspension let me go back to it for a moment as a jump detection system. Man, that's amazing. The computer knows when the motorcycle leaves the ground and prepares the suspension for landing. Honestly, it doesn't get any better than that. The first thing I'll do when I get the adventure sports in Poland with electronic suspension is go find a jump, hit it, and see how it works in practice. Maybe I'll move on to that, shall I? I'll move on to that because I had a real dilemma. I'm not going to lie. I want to have an Africa Twin at home. So what? I'm a motorcyclist. I like the bike. I want to have it at home. So sooner or later, the Africa Twin will end up in my garage. But I'll get to the point that I'm going to have a problem deciding which one to choose. But let's move on to this one, the so-called base CRF 1100, which has a smaller tank, 19 liters, compared to 25 liters here. This is the one that's the successor to the very first model, the one that came out before the Adventure Sport. And today I rode it off-road. The off-road section wasn't quite enough for me to really enjoy this motorcycle because it was just some gravel roads, nothing special, some ruts, but you know, the kind made by running water. And there, once again, the conventional suspension showed that it's one of the best, if not the best. But seriously, I truly think I'm bold enough to confidently say that this is absolutely the best chassis in the entire adventure class. Because when I deeply consider those KTMs and other similar bikes, they're all undeniably good. But this particular one just consistently amazes me every single meter of the journey. So the suspension system worked exceptionally great, effortlessly absorbing all the significant bumps and challenging imperfections. And again, it's that incredibly robust and well-designed frame that makes all the difference. When I got there, there weren't many corners, and I wish there had been a lot more. You know, those kinds of curves, curve after curve, where you could go sideways and try to feel out the front and rear. There wasn't much of that, but once or twice I caught that kind of flow where the bike just goes and I feel it taking the turn throttle, taking the turn throttle. Unfortunately, there's still a problem with those really tight hairpin turns. Then I was really messing up because you want to sit like on an enduro, really close to the handlebars, but unfortunately there's a tank here and you still can't do it that way. You know, this motorcycle just encourages you to ride enduro style, makes you want to move forward, load up the front wheel, give it gas and power out. But it's not that simple because after all, this is, no matter how you look at it, an adventure motorcycle. The riding position itself, I would also change it a little bit, but it's okay. For me, it's okay, but to really tailor it to myself, I would change the handlebars a bit, move them a little forward. And if that wasn't enough, I'd use, I don't know, maybe a 1 centimeter riser to raise the handlebars a bit higher and a bit more forward. Because when I was riding and really accelerating hard, I felt like I was being pulled off the motorcycle a bit. I had to hold on, brace myself a little, mostly with my hands. If it were set more forward, I think I could brace myself better with my feet on the foot pegs and have even more control. Just a small detail, I rode both the DCT and manual versions off-road. And now here's the answer to the next question. The next question was, should I get the DCT or the manual? For example, someone asked whether to choose DCT or manual if it's going to be 70% asphalt and 30% off-road. We can't look at it in terms of how much asphalt and how much off-road, because DCT works well in both. You need to ask yourself how much of your riding is sporty and how much is just regular riding, because this applies to both the adventure sports and the standard version. If you have a sporty streak, you like to upshift, downshift aggressively, sometimes want to, I don't know, race with naked bikes or sport motorcycles in the corners, because that's possible on the road. Or if you want to keep up with much lighter enduro bikes off-road, then go for the manual. It works brilliantly, you have full control, and it's a ton of fun. In all other cases, if you don't have such sporty ambitions, I would go for the DCT. The comfort is simply unbelievable. And because the DCT is now 2 kilograms lighter, if I remember correctly, it's 2 kilograms that's actually very important, because they are positioned low by the engine, and those 2 kilograms really make a difference. And now the gap between the weight of the DCT and the manual has become much smaller, and the difference in riding is really minimal. And you can feel it most of all off-road, and I rode the DCT there, and it was really great, very predictable. I was riding in automatic mode, it was selecting the gear as well for me, and I was thinking, damn, I could just ride with DCT off-road from now on. But then we had the second lap, the same route, and I got on the manual again and fell in love all over again. It's the same as it was back in 2015, I think, in South Africa, where it was actually much better, because there we had desert loops and you could just go full throttle. Oh Jesus, that was the best test in the world. And here it wasn't bad either, but I still feel like I didn't get enough off-road. That doesn't change the fact that this machine, damn, just look at how it handles those corners. With that control, you shift gears, you go, you give it gas, you lift it up. But remember, you really need to know what you're doing and stay focused, because I got used to the DCT pretty quickly. For example, I use to brake, just press the rear brake and that was it. But here you have to remember to use the clutch properly, so you don't, for instance, stall the engine. And you see here you have, for example, the advantage of the GTR. You won't stall the engine, it won't cut out. But here I actually stalled the CRF once or twice, and there was even a time when I stalled it on some incline, and oh man, I had to catch myself with my foot. Fortunately, everything was more or less under control. There's something else here. There was talk about this subframe, that now it's aluminum instead of steel. And a debate about if a steel one can be repaired on the road, welded or straightened much more easily if something happens. Yes, that's true. But let's also remember that this one can be unscrewed. Similarly, aluminum can also be welded or reinforced somehow. Something can be done. However, I would prefer to have a bolted aluminum subframe, because in case of an accident, like a crash or an off-road incident where the motorcycle flips over and bends the rear, it turns out that if we want to repair it through insurance or something, if we have that option, then we end up with a damaged frame, the entire frame, and that's a problem, because it might turn out to be a total loss and we lose our motorcycle. Here we can simply replace this part entirely and be done with it. Here's what I'm thinking. As far as the task, the mission of creating the new Africa Twin goes, the execution was brilliant, really, a solid 5+, maybe even a 6-. The Japanese truly did an absolutely amazing job. The crucial thing is, it's a brilliantly executed task, meticulously planned and implemented at the very design stage. But I have some thoughts about the concept itself. Look, these are two motorcycles you can buy at the dealership right now. The base CRF 1100, the 1100L Adventure Sports, and do you see what I mean? This is really a motorcycle that in theory is more geared towards rallies and adventure. It works great in the city because it's agile, fun, a bit smaller than this one. But look at the rear, there's not even half a luggage rack to strap anything onto. I don't know, a sleeping mat, a tent, anything. Well, this windshield is really just symbolic. If you want to go on a trip somewhere, it's going to be a bit too small. And suddenly it turns out that the previous Africa, the base model, was a bit more versatile as a motorcycle, because it had handles, it had mounts for panniers, and we could use it for a rally, or if needed, pack it up and, excuse my language, just take off to the other end of Asia. And here, you know, this one is very sporty, which is great, but touring kind of takes a back seat. And here, on the other hand, it's very much geared towards touring super efficient. Can go far, but I'd feel bad taking it off-road and getting it dirty, because I'd be much more likely to drop this one. That doesn't change the fact that I talked to the Japanese guys. And of course, these plastics, I'm not sure if you can see me now. These plastic panels can be removed. You can install a regular luggage rack, just like over there. But, you know, you have to pay a bit extra for that. You have to add this, add that, and add something else. it's not ready-made. So that's just my complaint. Like I said, conceptually, it's the only flaw that came to my mind, although it's hard to say because it really depends on your needs. I think I've covered everything. As for things like fuel consumption or not, all of that will, of course, be in the magazine about the tubeless rims here, and the tube type 1 still being more road-oriented. What more can I say? Like I said, I still need to think about this motorcycle a bit more and write it up calmly for the magazine. So if you like this content, you have to subscribe and do all that stuff. Although I've noticed that subscriptions don't really mean anything when I look at other channels, but still, it's nice to have them and be able to brag that we have a lot of subscribers. But above all, read the magazine. I encourage you to subscribe because besides those cool tests, there are also a lot of interesting materials that you might otherwise miss. That's it. Will I buy the CRF? Yes, I will buy the CRF. And now I'm also wondering which CRF to get, because I'm already an older guy and suddenly I say to Bariwa, hey, I'm kind of leaning toward this one because, you know, it's more versatile and it rides amazingly. But today, after riding this one, I have this idea that maybe I can manage it. I don't know, because it all comes down to money. Buy this one, ride it for 2 or 3 years, and then swap it for that one. At the point when I'll be able to go somewhere farther for various cool, pleasant reasons. That's all. Best regards to all of you. If you have any questions, just ask in the comments. I'll keep answering because that's what I'm here for. Bye.